Catherine never imagined that a single man, Charlie Lancaster, would turn her carefully structured life upside down. He wasn't just any CEO, he was the Ice King of Lancaster Technologies, a man as untouchable as he was powerful. And she was just an invisible administrative assistant, fetching coffee and organizing files. Every day was the same for Catherine. A tiny apartment, a crowded subway ride, and 8 hours of work where no one really noticed her. But then, the mystery gifts began. A pen, a book, anonymous notes with no signature. And then came the fire. Catherine never expected that a life-or-death moment would uncover a secret that was never meant to be revealed and change her world forever. Every weekday morning started the same for Catherine Hayes. 5:30 a.m. The alarm screamed, pulling her from restless sleep. She hit snooze twice, a small rebellion before another day inside the glass fortress of Lancaster Technologies. 7:15 a.m. A crowded subway ride, the press of bodies, the robotic voice announcing stops, reminding her she was just one of millions moving through the city. 8:00 a.m. Catherine walked into the office, sterile and pristine. Like always, she went straight to the coffee machine, memorizing the complicated orders of executives, especially Charlie Lancaster's black coffee. No sugar, just a splash of almond milk. He barely acknowledged her. His sharp gaze swept over her like she was part of the office furniture, unimportant, unseen. But then, one day, something changed. A small velvet box sat on her desk. Inside, a deep blue Mont Blanc fountain pen gleamed under the fluorescent lights. She frowned. She hadn't ordered this. A folded note lay inside, written in strong, elegant handwriting. "For your words." Catherine glanced around, searching for someone, anyone, who could explain. But no one seemed to notice. Who would send this, and why? Lily, her closest friend at work, snatched the pen, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Oh my God, Catherine, this thing costs more than your rent. Do you have a secret admirer?" "It's probably a mistake," Catherine muttered, but unease curled in her stomach. But it didn't stop there. A week later, she returned from lunch to find a vintage book sitting on her desk, a rare edition of Pride and Prejudice. She stared. She had only mentioned this book once, in passing, in a casual conversation in the break room. Inside, a simple note: "Second chances exist." Her heart pounded. This wasn't just a coincidence. Someone out there knew her better than she had ever realized, and that terrified her more than anything. Then came the VIP symphony tickets, the exact concert she had sighed about when calling Lily 3 weeks ago. This time, the note read, "Beauty should be shared." Lily nearly screamed at lunch. "Catherine, someone is watching you. Who could it be?" Catherine didn't know. But what unsettled her wasn't the gifts. It was how deeply this person seemed to understand her. She started watching the handwriting of her colleagues, studying the way men grip their pens when signing documents. She became a detective in her own life, piecing together clues. And every morning, as she placed Charlie Lancaster's coffee on his desk, she wondered, was it just her imagination, or did his gaze linger on her just a little longer than before? Late at night, the office was silent. Catherine quietly gathered her things, stacking the last of the reports neatly on her desk. Most employees had gone home hours ago. The only light still shining came from the executive floor upstairs. She was about to leave when she heard a voice from the conference room, deep but lacking its usual coldness. "Charlie Lancaster." She paused. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something in his tone made her stop in her tracks. Moving carefully, she approached the slightly open door. On the screen, Charlie was speaking to a group of children in hospital gowns. Some were bald, their eyes tired yet filled with excitement. "The new hospital wing will be ready next month," Charlie was saying, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, "and the equipment we ordered will arrive ahead of schedule." A little girl beamed. "Thank you, Mr. Charlie." Charlie smiled, a smile Catherine had never seen before. "No need to thank me, Ellie. Just promise me you'll get better, okay?" Catherine forgot how to breathe. This wasn't the Charlie Lancaster the world knew, the ruthless CEO with an unreadable expression. This was someone else entirely. The rumors about him suddenly made sense. A fiancé lost in an accident, a broken family. The years he disappeared from the public eye, people assumed he had been building his empire. But now, Catherine understood. He had been helping those who had no voice. She stood frozen. Charlie Lancaster wasn't heartless. He had simply mastered the art of hiding his heart from a world that never bothered to look deeper. When the call ended, Charlie sighed, rubbing his temples. A moment of rare vulnerability, his mask slipping for just a second. And then, his gaze lifted, locking onto hers. Silence stretched between them. Catherine felt her heartbeat stutter. Charlie didn't speak. He simply looked at her, long enough that she felt like he was deciphering every thought in her mind. Then, as if making a decision, he stood up and walked toward her. "I thought everyone had gone home," he said, his voice measured. Catherine had no idea what to say. But she knew, from this moment on, she would never look at him the same way again. 11:27 p.m. Catherine stared at her computer screen, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. The final edits on Charlie's presentation were nearly done. The shareholder meeting was in the morning, and it had to be perfect. The office was nearly deserted, the only light coming from her screen and a few dim hallway bulbs. The silence felt unnatural, like she had stepped into an empty world where she was the last one left. Then she smelled it. A faint, acrid scent in the air. Catherine frowned. She stood up, stepping outside her office, and her stomach clenched. Smoke. It seeped in from the far end of the hallway, curling across the carpet like an invisible monster. Then the fire alarm screamed. Panic surged through her. She spun toward the emergency exit, but flames were already blocking the stairwell. She turned the other way, but the smoke was thickening, swallowing the entire floor. Catherine's lungs burned, every breath searing like fire itself. Smoke curled around her like a suffocating embrace, and for the first time, she truly felt helpless. A voice shouted through the chaos. "Catherine!" She turned and saw Charlie. He was running toward her, no longer the perfectly composed CEO. His white shirt wrinkled, sleeves pushed up, urgency in every movement. Gone was the Ice King of Lancaster Technologies. In his place was a man pushing through fire to find her. "This way!" Charlie's grip was firm yet urgent as he pulled her through the blinding smoke, his voice the only steady thing in the chaos. "Trust me!" Without hesitation, he led her toward the conference room, the one place that might save them. He slammed the door shut just as flames crept closer, the air thick with smoke. Catherine choked, her lungs burning as she struggled to breathe. Charlie shrugged off his jacket, quickly drenching it with water from a nearby bottle, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Breathe through this." His voice was calm but firm. "We're gonna be okay." Catherine looked up. His blue eyes weren't panicked, only focused. He wasn't afraid, he wasn't hesitating. He was only concerned about getting her out alive. She had never seen anyone like him. Then Charlie spoke again, and his words hit her harder than the fire ever could. "The gifts, they were all me." Catherine's breath caught. "The pen, the book, the symphony tickets." His voice was hoarse from the smoke. "It was me, all of it." Outside, sirens blared, red lights flashing against the glass. Catherine felt her world tilt. And just before the darkness pulled her under, Charlie's hand stayed wrapped around hers, refusing to let go. 11:27 p.m. Catherine stared at her computer screen, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. The final edits on Charlie's presentation were nearly done. The shareholder meeting was in the morning, and it had to be perfect. The office was nearly deserted, the only light coming from her screen and a few dim hallway bulbs. The silence felt unnatural, like she had stepped into an empty world where she was the last one left. Then she smelled it. A faint, acrid scent in the air. Catherine frowned. She stood up, stepping outside her office, and her stomach clenched. Smoke. It seeped in from the far end of the hallway, curling across the carpet like an invisible monster. Then the fire alarm screamed. Panic surged through her. She spun toward the emergency exit, but flames were already blocking the stairwell. She turned the other way, but the smoke was thickening, swallowing the entire floor. Catherine coughed violently, heat licking at her skin. She was trapped. A voice shouted through the chaos. "Catherine!" She turned and saw Charlie. He was running toward her, no longer the perfectly composed CEO. His white shirt wrinkled, sleeves pushed up, urgency in every movement. Gone was the Ice King of Lancaster Technologies. In his place was a man pushing through fire to find her. "This way!" Charlie grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the large conference room, the one with fireproof doors. He slammed the door shut just as flames crept closer, the air thick with smoke. Catherine choked, her lungs burning as she struggled to breathe. Charlie shrugged off his white shirt wrinkled, quickly drenching it with water from a nearby bottle, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Breathe through this." His voice was calm but firm. "We're gonna be okay." Catherine looked up. His blue eyes weren't panicked, only focused. He wasn't afraid, he wasn't hesitating. He was only concerned about getting her out alive. She had never seen anyone like him. Then Charlie spoke again, and his words hit her harder than the fire ever could. "The gifts, they were all me." Catherine's breath caught. "The pen, the book, the symphony tickets." His voice was hoarse from the smoke. "It was me, all of it." Outside, sirens blared, red lights flashing against the glass. Catherine felt her world tilt. And just before the darkness pulled her under, Charlie's hand stayed wrapped around hers, refusing to let go. A hospital room, white lights, the steady beep of a heart monitor. Catherine opened her eyes. A dull, burning ache spread through her lungs, like every breath still carried the fire inside. She realized she was in a hospital bed, an IV drip attached to her arm. Then she saw Charlie. He was sitting right beside her, his white shirt still stained with soot, his face exhausted, but his blue eyes never left her. How long had he been here? "You're awake." His voice was hoarse, but filled with relief. Catherine tried to speak, but her throat felt raw. Charlie immediately poured her a glass of water, his hands shaking slightly as he handed it to her. "I thought you didn't make it." Her voice was weak. Charlie shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "I told you I wasn't going to let anything happen to you." And in that moment, everything became clear. No more mystery gifts, no more stolen glances in the morning. Charlie Lancaster hadn't just been watching her from afar. He had chosen her. But life wasn't a fairy tale. When Catherine returned to work a week later, the whispers had already begun. She didn't need to hear them clearly to understand. Why would the CEO risk his life for her? Do you think they had something going on? She's obviously using him. No one cared about the truth. No one saw the man who had risked everything, not as a CEO protecting an employee, but as a man fighting for someone who mattered more than anything. He tried to shield her, but the more he did, the worse the rumors became. And then, HR called her in. "We believe a department transfer might be in everyone's best interest." Best for who? Catherine wanted to laugh. She walked out of that office with her mind made up. This couldn't continue. That evening, she wrote her resignation letter, but instead of emailing it, she walked straight to the executive floor, where Charlie was in a board meeting. Under the stunned gazes of the company's top executives, she placed the letter in front of him. "I'm not leaving because I did anything wrong." She met his gaze, steady and sure. "I'm not leaving because of the rumors or because of the whispers behind my back. I'm leaving because for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want, and I won't let fear stop me." Charlie held her stare, not surprised, only something that looked like regret. But he didn't stop her. Because he knew, just as she did, this was a battle she could never win if she stayed. 2 days later, a knock sounded at Catherine's apartment door. She opened it, and Charlie stood there. No tailored suit, no distant demeanor, just a man with unspoken words in his eyes and a thick manuscript in his hands. Her manuscript. Catherine froze, her heart pounding. "You read it?" Charlie nodded, voice steady. "Every word." He lifted the pages, lined with his handwritten notes. "You wrote a beautiful story, Catherine. His voice softened. "But you got one thing wrong." Catherine frowned. "Wrong? What do you mean?" Charlie inhaled deeply, as if finally gathering the courage he had long lacked. "The ending." She barely had time to react before he continued. "Because in the real story," his voice shook slightly, "I have loved you for so long, Catherine, but I was a coward. I thought standing in the shadows, watching over you was enough. I thought the gifts could speak the words I never dared to say. But when I almost lost you, I knew silence was no longer an option." Catherine felt the world tilt. "I hid behind the gifts." Charlie let out a small, broken laugh, his blue eyes filled with something raw and real. "I thought watching you from a distance was enough. But when I saw you surrounded by smoke, when I thought I had lost you, I realized that if I didn't reach for you, I would have nothing left." Catherine swallowed hard, her chest tightening at every word. "I resigned." She stared at him, speechless. Charlie met her gaze, unwavering. "I don't care about titles or what the world expects of me. I don't want to be your boss, Catherine. I just want to be the man who sees you, truly sees you for everything you are and everything you dream to be." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. She stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Do you want to come in?" Charlie gave a small, knowing smile. "I thought you'd never ask." That night, they talked like there had never been a wall between them. That night, they started writing a new story, their own. 6 months later, their novel was published. One evening, as Charlie walked into Catherine's living room, his gaze suddenly caught on something. A framed photograph on her bookshelf. Catherine followed his eyes, then let out a soft laugh. It was an old charity concert photo from 20 years ago. On stage, her mother played the violin, and beside her, a little girl with Catherine's eyes. Charlie exhaled, as if something finally made sense. "Fate has been trying to bring us together for a long time," he murmured, "but this time, I'm not letting it slip away." Catherine looked up at him, smiling. "Because love isn't about fate or destiny. It's about choosing each other, every single day, and together we'll keep writing, one page at a time." Catherine and Charlie's love wasn't just sweet, it was filled with laughter. Charlie, once a cold and calculated CEO, now struggled to make breakfast for Catherine, often resulting in something more burnt than any failed business deal. "Charlie, is that supposed to be scrambled eggs or an emergency?" Catherine giggled, watching him frown at the pan. "I can run a company, Catherine, but I can't run a frying pan." On the other hand, Catherine wasn't much better when she tried to teach Charlie yoga to help him relax. "This pose is supposed to release tension." "Catherine, I'm not tense, but I think my spine is about to snap." Between romantic nights and ridiculous moments, they both knew they had found the perfect person to spend forever with. 1 year later, Catherine never imagined she would stand in a room filled with candlelight, her heart pounding, as the man before her knelt down, a ring in his hand. Charlie took a deep breath, as if, despite once being a powerful CEO, this was the hardest thing he had ever done. "Catherine Hayes?" His voice was steady, his blue eyes locked onto hers. "I spent too long hiding how I felt, but from the moment I almost lost you in that fire, I swore I would never let that happen again. You are not just the woman I love. You are my partner, the person who showed me that life isn't just about numbers and strategies, but about small, priceless moments." Charlie opened the box, a simple but elegant diamond ring. "So, I ask you, will you continue writing this story with me? Will you be my wife?" Catherine laughed softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Of course, yes," Charlie grinned, standing up and pulling her into his arms, as cheers and applause erupted around them. A sunny day, a chapel filled with white roses. Catherine walked down the aisle, her father by her side, but her eyes were only on one person, Charlie, waiting at the end, his blue eyes filled with nothing but love. When her father placed her hand in his, Charlie held it tight, making a silent promise that he would never let go again. "From today, we start a new chapter together." And as they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, Catherine knew this was the most beautiful chapter yet. 3 years later. Their cozy beachside home was filled with laughter. Charlie sat on the living room floor, his once crisp suits replaced by a rolled-up shirt and soft, adoring eyes as he held their twin daughters in his lap. Emma and Lily, their little princesses. Catherine leaned against the doorway, smiling as she watched her husband play with their daughters. "Daddy, read us a story." Emma, with the same deep blue eyes as her father, pouted. "Tell us the love story about you and Mommy," Lily, the mischievous one, giggled. Charlie glanced at Catherine, his eyes twinkling. "Our love story? All right, but you should know, your mother wrote it." Catherine laughed, stepping forward to sit beside them, wrapping all three in her arms. In that moment, she knew she had everything, and the story they had written together would continue forever.